How's it going, guys? Welcome to our first project using HTML and CSS. Now today we're going to go and build an actual website, or at least part of an actual website, just to give you guys an idea about how we put together the pages that we have inside a website. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take all the previous lessons that we learned so far and sort of combine them into this project here, so we can actually learn how to use all the things that we learned in the previous episodes. So as you guys can see in front of me here, I have a basic design which I built inside Adobe Experience Design, which is a software from Adobe. And if you guys want to download this image, you can just go ahead and download it in the description if you wish to have it. I do have a Patreon page where you can get all the lesson material for the episodes that I put up here. And again, if you don't want to get access to the the lesson material, you can just go ahead and use whatever images or videos or whatever you might have to replace what I'm using in this episode here, okay? So we're going to go ahead and build this design here, and as you may notice, we do have a desktop design and we have a mobile design. Now, just for the sake of this exercise here, I'm not going to build the entire mobile design together with you guys because it's going to be a really, really long episode if I have to build everything that you guys see in front of me here. So what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on the front page. We're going to build the desktop version and the mobile version. And then we're just going to go ahead and build the regular pages of the other two sub pages here. What you may notice, if I just go ahead and zoom in so you guys can actually see what we're going to build today, is that we have a basic front page that is not too complicated. I came up with this design a while back when I was preparing for this episode. It's not advanced, but it's just a really good, simple design for us to, do in this episode. So what we have here is a basic header with a navigation and a logo in it, and a link up here that leads to cases. And underneath the banner, you guys can see that we also have a couple of links that will lead to the different sub pages. Now, we're not going to insert any sort of background images inside these links here because I just didn't have the time to get a bunch of images ready for the background images. Again, you don't have to if you don't want to. It's really up to you because it's your design. And at the bottom here, we have a footer. Now inside my subpages, we have a cases page where you can go in and see all the different cases that you might have made. Let's say you made a couple of websites or video projects, or maybe you're a photographer and you want to show off your portfolio. Then you can go ahead and show them off inside the cases page, and then underneath it we have a contact link where we have phone number and email address. Then if we were to actually click one of these pages, we get taken into a case page where you can see whatever project you might have made. In my case, I have a video that I have inside my root folder that we're going to show inside my subpage here, and then a short description down here, okay? Now again, this design here is not something that I took online, so if you guys want to, and you want to have this design and build a portfolio based off my design here, just go ahead and grab it and copy it as much as you want. I'm not going to, say that this is my design, so just do whatever you want with it and build your own website if you feel like it, okay? So we're just going to go ahead and, before we go into the code, just take a look at the mobile design, because I did mention in the responsive design episode for this course here that we should always design for mobile first. Meaning that when we start designing and programming this website, we need to focus on the mobile version first, and then we're going to expand using responsive design inside the CSS file using media queries. We're going to go ahead and expand out to the desktop version. And what you guys may also see is that I did not focus on a tablet version. So we're not going to build a tablet version for this website, even though you should probably do it, because there's quite a jump from mobile to desktop design-wise. So we're just going to go ahead and get started on this design here. Now, one thing I want to do before we start coding anything is just to show you guys what I have so far, because I have just a little bit, such as the video that we're going to use inside the case page, the images that I'm going to use, just that sort of thing. And I also want to mention that the menu here does have a slight difference from the desktop version to the mobile version. So maybe we should actually focus on the desktop version when it comes to making the navigation up here. So just mentioning that before we get started. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump inside the coding files. And as you guys may see, is that I have an index page and I have a style sheet ready. Now, there's nothing inside the style sheets besides reset style code, which is something you can just download from the internet, which, again, I do have an episode showing how to get reset styling inside your document. So this is just basically to reset the browser to make sure that the website doesn't look different in different browsers, because browsers do have different stylings applied to them as a default. Okay, so at the bottom here, we're going to go ahead and include our code once we do actually get to it. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to basically go inside our design, and we're going to focus on the mobile version first. Now, as you may notice, the navigation for the mobile version is not the usual one you see on mobile websites where you have to click a button and then it opens up a menu, because that would make more sense since it's a mobile version. But because we haven't talked about JavaScript or jQuery or any other coding languages, we're just going to make a basic navigation with buttons in it. And this navigation should then follow as we scroll down so it doesn't go away and we have to go all the way to the top again to click any links. Okay, so it's just going to be a basic HTML attempt on a mobile menu. So we're going to go ahead and go inside our code sheet or inside our index page, and we're going to go ahead and start creating this header that we have at the top here. So we're just going to take it from the top to bottom, one at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside my body tags, and I'm just going to go ahead and start creating the necessary tags for the different section of the front page. So I'm going to go ahead and say we have, first of all, a header tag, because we do have a header inside the website. Then we have a main tag, which we use in order to include main content of a website. And at the bottom here, I'm going to go ahead and include a footer tag. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is inside the header, I'm going to go ahead and create our logo, because we do have a logo inside the website. I call mine mmtuts, and you can call whatever you want to. You can call it something that you want to call it. I just decided for mmtuts because that's the name of the YouTube channel. So I'm going to go inside my design here. And again, because we want to, at least for the header here, focus on the desktop version, I'm just going to go ahead and go back up to the desktop version, because you guys can see we do have a bar, we have another link over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and stay up here in the desktop version for at least the header here. So we're going to go ahead and just take a look at it. We can see we have a white background inside a bar that goes all the way across. And we also have a logo, we have a navigation, and then a link over here on the right side. So that's what we need to make inside our code sheet. And I did use different fonts. As you may notice, these are not some of the default like Arial or Times New Roman. God forbid you actually use that one. So I did actually include a font inside my head tag up here, which I just got from Google Fonts. In my example, I'm using Catamaran. And I'm using Cormorant Garamond. Pretty hard to pronounce those names, at least for me. So inside my header here, I'm just going to go ahead and start building what we have inside the website. So the first thing was a logo. So I'm going to go ahead and say we have a paragraph tag. Notice I did not use an H tag because this is not really a header. It's just a logo name. And I'm going to go ahead and write mmtuts. And maybe this should actually be a link, because I do want to be able to click this logo and go back to the front page. So let's actually go ahead and change it from a paragraph to a anchor tag instead. And let's actually go ahead and link it directly back to the front page immediately. So we're going to include a hyperreference. And I'm just going to set this one to index.html. There we go. Whoops, one too many. And underneath the logo, I'm going to go ahead and include the navigation. So we're going to go ahead and say we have a nav tag inside HTML, which means that we're starting a navigation. And inside the nav tag, we're going to create an unordered list, because we need to have the list items of the menu. I'm going to create a list item. And inside the list item, I'm going to create a link. I'm just going to go ahead and do it like this. And inside the link, we're going to go ahead and say we have a, let's say, what do we actually have inside our example here? We do have a portfolio, then about me, and then contact. So we're going to say portfolio. Then I'm going to copy it, paste it underneath here 2 more times, because we had 3 links inside the navigation. The second one is going to be about me, and the last one is going to be contacts. And again, you can change these links if you want to. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing here. Now, I just want to mention my keyboard is actually right underneath the microphone, so I have a bit of a hard time looking at the keyboard while I'm typing. So if I make typos, it's because I can't see my keyboard. Inside the links here, we're going to go ahead and change the link from hashtag, because that's the placeholder if we don't have a link yet. I'm going to change it from hashtag to portfolio.html in the first one. Then I'm going to go down to about me and change it to about.html. And again, you don't have to name it specifically this. You can change it to something that you want to name it if you want the file to look different. Just go ahead and avoid using multiple words inside the document, because it's not really something that I think looks nice. You could do it, but I don't think it looks nice. Okay, so there we go. And what we need to do now is we need to go ahead and include the rest of the navigation inside the HTML. Or not the navigation, but we do also have a link on the right side of our header. So I'm just going to go and include that. Now, that is just going to be a link, because this basically just links inside our cases page. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that we have a basic link, because it's not a list. It's just an individual link by itself. And I'm going to go ahead and say we have cases. Then I'm going to link to a cases.html, like so. Now, one more thing we're going to go ahead and do inside the index page before we start styling anything is I'm going to go ahead and include a class to the different anchor tags that we have in here, at least the ones not inside the navigation, because we need to be able to style this specific link up here differently than this link down here. And we can only do that by adding a class to it. So we're going to go ahead and say we have a class in the first one set to, we can call something like header-brand, because this is a logo, which is the brand of the website. And we can go down to the anchor tag down here, give it a class set to header-cases. Again, you could name this cases-link or something. I'm just going to go ahead and name it like this. So now that we have this, you guys can go ahead and see that we do have some things going on inside the website. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to style the navigation, or at least the header section, before we continue to the next part. Not because we have to, but because I would like to show you guys what we've done so far. So now we need to start focusing on designing for mobile first. Okay, when I said we had to focus on the desktop version for the design, I just meant that we had to include all the HTML elements that needed to be included inside the desktop version before we start doing anything down here. So now we have all the HTML tags that we need to have, so we can go ahead and focus on design when it comes to the mobile version. And again, if you want to create a mobile version, we right-click inside the browser, inspect the website, and then we go up to this little tab up here that says Toggle Device Toolbar. We click it. And then you can see we can change it from responsive to iPhone, let's go ahead and say iPhone 7. I think that changed. That used to be iPhone 6. So now we can actually see a mobile version and we can actually start designing for it. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside my style sheet. And I'm going to go ahead and first of all create the little, the header background up here, which is white. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside my style sheet. And what you're going to go ahead and notice here is that I do have some styling in here as a default. But this is only reset styling. This is not something that I programmed. This is just, you can download reset styling from the internet if you want to, just to reset all the different styles that you have as a default inside the different browsers. And again, I do have an episode inside my course here where I explained how to do this, so this should not be anything new to you guys. So at the bottom here, I'm going to go and include my code. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and give my website a background color so I can actually see when I add a white background to our header. Otherwise, we can't see it. So I'm going to say we have a body, curly brackets, and I'm going to set the body to background dash color, set to a slightly gray color. So I'm just going to say hashtag F3, 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 which should be good enough. And then I'm going to go ahead and go underneath the body tag. I'm going to go ahead and say we have a header styling that we want to apply. I'm going to set this one as a background dash color set to white, which is FFF. Going to give it a width because it needs to go all the way from left to right. So we're going to say width 100%. And we're going to give it a height set to 100 pixels. Now, I do also want to point out that we need to include the meta viewport inside our head tag, because otherwise it's not going to apply the, the responsive design as it should. So you need to include this line of code inside your head tag, okay? Inside our style sheet, I'm going to go ahead and start styling the brand that we have inside the header, which is the logo. So I'm going to go underneath the header here, say we have a header, and inside the header we have a class called header-brand, curly brackets. I'm going to go ahead and start by just styling the font for this specific logo. So I'm going to give it a font dash family set to Catamaran, if that is spelled correctly. going to set a font size to 24 pixels. I'm going to give it a color set to not completely black, but 111. Because completely black, I don't know, for some reason it doesn't look quite, it sort of hurts your eyes inside websites if it's not because you have a very specific reason to use completely black. So it's just my personal preference not to use completely black unless it's like a background or something. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use 111. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a font weight as well, because I do think we have a slightly bold text in here. So I'm going to say font dash weight. I'm going to set it to 900, if that is not too thick. And I'm going to go ahead and see what we have so far inside the website. So I'm just going to go ahead and refresh. And as you guys can see, we now have something going on. Now, right now, we also need to make the text uppercase, and we can do that using two ways. Either we can go inside our index page and just rewrite MM in capitalized letters, or I can do the other option if I want to change it later and I don't have to mess around with the actual index page. I can go ahead and make a styling called text dash transform and set it to uppercase. Save it. And you may notice there was also a underline underneath all the links inside the website, and I want to get rid of that. So instead of just getting rid of it inside the styling here, I'm actually going to remove it from all links inside the website. So I'm going to go at the top here, say we have a multiplication symbol, which means that we're styling everything inside the website using this specific styling. And I'm going to set a text dash decoration set to none. Okay, so now if we were to go back inside the website, refresh the browser, you guys can see that now we have something that looks a bit more like the design. Now, as you may notice, we also need to center the link inside the mobile version. So if you go back inside the style sheet and go underneath here, we can go ahead and say we want to, first of all, display our link as a block element. And the reason we do this is because when it comes to links, I like to make them into a block element because it becomes easier to style it afterwards. Okay, so we make it into a block, and then we go ahead and say we want to center the block by using margin 0 auto. And we also want to set a text dash align set to center. If we go ahead and refresh the browser, you guys can see that now we have a centered link inside the browser here, inside the mobile version of the website. So I also want to create some distance from the top because it's touching the top, and I do not want to have that. So if we were to just go ahead and create just a slight spacing at the top of the website, we can go ahead and say we want to either create a margin or padding. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and include a padding dash top. Actually, let's go ahead and add a padding to top and bottom. So we're just going to say padding because we also want spacing from the navigation once we do actually get to that one. So I'm going to say padding, set it to 20 pixels from the top and bottom, and 0 pixels from left and right. Refresh the browser, and as you guys can see, we now have some spacing going on. So the next thing we need to do now is we need to style the navigation. So we're going to go inside our style sheet and say that we have a header with a nav tag inside of it, with a unordered list inside of it, curly brackets. Then I'm just going to go ahead and copy, paste, and say we have a list item inside the unordered list. I'm going to copy, paste again, and say we have a link inside the list item. So now we can actually style all three different parts of the navigation here. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and copy some of the text that we have up here, some of the styling, because we need to have a font, we need to have a color, we need to have different things going on here. So I'm just going to copy them and paste them inside the navigation link down here. Now I also want to display the links next to each other. So I'm going to go up inside my list item up here, and I'm going to go ahead and include two pieces of code. Well, three pieces of code. I'm going to first of all have a display set to inline dash block. Then I'm going to go ahead and say, whoops, let's actually go ahead and correct that spelling mistake. Then I'm going to go ahead and say we have a float set to left. And you might be asking, why am I including a float? Because technically the inline block is going to set them next to each other, so we don't really need the float. But the reason I'm doing this is because if you don't use float, then there's going to be a slight gap between the links, and I want to get rid of that using float. Okay? After float, we need to include a list style because I do not want to have bullet points if we do actually have it inside the browser. So let's actually just go ahead and remove them. So I'm going to set it to none. Let's go ahead and refresh the browser, and as you guys can see, we now have the links next to each other. Now we don't want to have the, what do you call it, the font weight here, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove the font weight, because that is way too much thickness for the font. There we go. And I also want to change the font size, because it's not going to be the same size as the logo up here, so I'm just going to go ahead and check what I had inside the design. It was set to 16 pixels, so I'm going to go ahead and set this one to 16 as well. There we go. And I also want to go ahead and remove our link that we have over here called cases from the mobile version. So we're just going to go ahead and go inside our code and say that we have a header with a class called header-cases, because that's what we named it. And I'm going to set this one to a display none. So it's not going to display itself inside the website when we have the styling applied to it, like so. So now we need to censor the navigation, and we need to create some spacing in between the links. So I'm going to go ahead and say we have our, let's go ahead and actually style the list item. Let's actually go ahead and style the list item, because if we were to style the anchor tag, then we will have a clickable area in between the links. And I don't think that's a good idea for the mobile version. So let's actually just go ahead and stick with the list item up here and create some spacing using this one. So I'm going to go ahead and say we have a padding set to 0 pixels from top and bottom, and maybe, I don't know, 16 pixels from left and right. Save it, refresh the browser, and now we have some spacing going on. Now we want to center it, so I'm going to go ahead and say we have our unordered list up here, because that is the entire navigation that we're styling. So I'm going to set this one to a margin 0 auto. Save it and refresh, and nothing happened. That's because we need to add a display block. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. Again, if you can't center things, just go ahead and add a display block to it, and then you can see if it works. Now, if we were to go inside the browser now and refresh it, you guys will actually notice that we do not have centered the navigation yet. And that's because right now, the navigation, or at least the unordered list, is going to be 100% width of the header it's inside of. So it's actually going to go all the way from left to right. Meaning that if it's going to center itself, then technically it is technically centered inside the header. So we need to change the width of the unordered list to make it fit the content inside itself. So we're going to go ahead and go inside our code, and we're going to go ahead and add a width and set it to fit-content. Going to go inside the browser and refresh it, and now you guys will see that we do have a navigation that has been centered. So now we have the navigation built, so let's actually go ahead and focus on the rest of the website. If I were to go ahead and go inside my design, you guys can see that right now we have a banner with some text inside of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and go inside my code again, inside my index page, and inside the main tag that we have down here, I'm going to go ahead and include a banner. Now do notice that we have text on top of the banner, so we need to insert not an image, but a background image. We do that by adding a div, or in this case, we could actually technically include a section, because this is a section with similar content inside of it. So we're going to say section, and inside the section here, I'm going to include the text that we need to insert inside the banner. So if we were to take a look at our design here, you guys may see that we do have a header that says I'm a freelance web developer, and then we have another text underneath here, which if we have to take a look at this at a optimization wise look, I do think there's more text down here that is relevant when it comes to what people might search for inside Google. So I'm going to insert the bottom text as an H1 tag and the top text as an H2 tag. Okay, so I'm going to go inside my section here and say we have an H2 tag. And underneath here, then we have a H1 tag. Then I'm just going to go ahead and copy the text. So I'm going to say I am a freelance web developer. Paste it in. I'm going to go inside and copy the other text that we have here and paste it in. Like so. Again, if your text is going outside the screen here, you can actually scroll to the right side. Know that you can go up inside view and say toggle soft wrap, which makes the text go down to the next line instead of just continuing out to the right side of the screen here. Okay, so just going to go ahead and, because I do actually have a new line inside the text here, I do want developer to go down to a new line, and the way we can do that is by including a break. So I'm just going to say we have a BR tag like so, which means that it's going to go to the next line. So now that we have this, we can actually go ahead and insert a background color inside the section tag. So I'm going to go inside my style sheet, and inside my style sheet, I'm just going to go ahead and go underneath our header styling. Because we have a new section here, we could actually make a comment for ourselves saying that index. So we can see this is the index page. And what we can do down here is we can go ahead and say we have a, well, we should probably not just style all the sections. We should probably include a class to it. So I'm going to say class is going to be equal to index dash banner. And again, all the sections are going to have index dash something as a name because it makes sense. So we know that this is styling for inside the index page. Okay, I'm going to save it, go inside my code, and I'm going to go and say we have a class called index dash banner. Then I'm going to go ahead and give it a width set to 100%. And when it comes to the height, I want it to be the entire height of the website minus the header that we have in here. Now, the way we do that is we're just going to go ahead and write height. And then I'm going to go ahead and include something called 100 VH, which is the view height. So the device we're sitting on is going to be 100% of the device height. Okay, so we're going to say 100 view height. Now, view height and view width is actually a new thing we have inside CSS. So I'm really glad that we have it now because it makes things quite a lot easier when it comes to making things the entire height of a browser. Now, there's going to be a problem here because if we were to go ahead and save this, actually, let's go ahead and add the background image so you guys can properly see it when we do actually need to refresh the browser. So I'm going to say we have a background dash, not color, but image. And I'm going to set a URL, parentheses, semicolon. And what I have inside my root folder here is I do actually have an image folder for the image that I'm going to use in this example here. So I'm going to take the banner.jpg and just sort of link to that one. So I'm going to say we have single quotes. We have a img folder, and inside the img folder, I'm going to say we have a banner.jpg, like so. I'm just going to go ahead and add the necessary background image styling. So I'm going to say we have background dash repeat set to no repeat. Going to set a background position. And again, there's some of these popping up here, so we can actually just choose one of them. So we can say background position, set it to center. Then we can say background size. I'm just going to choose one from the list here. Set it to cover, which means that it's just going to cover the entire banner, no matter the height and the width. So it's always going to fit inside the container. Okay. So now that we have this, we can actually go ahead and see what happens inside our browser here. So I'm just going to go and refresh. And as you guys can see, we now have a background image. Now, the thing that I want to point out here is that we did set it to 100 view height, meaning that it's going to be 100% of the view height. But we do also have a header up here, which actually pushes it down, meaning that if I were to scroll, we do have our image just going slightly below what we can actually see inside the website when we enter it for the first time. And I want to get rid of that. So we need to remove part of the bottom of the banner here. Now, the way we can do that is actually with a new thing we have inside CSS, which is also a really cool feature, which is if I were to go inside the height here, we can actually calculate a new height that it should have. Now, we know that the header has 100 pixels in height. So we can actually go inside our height calculation inside the image banner and say that we want to calc, which means calculate. And we want to calculate something inside the parentheses here. So I'm just going to delete the 100 view height and say we want to calculate 100 view height minus 100 pixels because that was the height of the header. So I'm going to go inside the browser and I'm just going to go ahead and refresh. And as you guys may notice, I cannot scroll down any further because we have nothing going down below the view of the website here when we enter it on a cell phone. So this is how we can get rid of this sort of thing, which I think is really nice. I really enjoy that we have the calc feature inside CSS now because that used to be a huge problem when we wanted to calculate something specific inside the website. So it really helps to have this feature inside CSS. So now what we want to do is we want to style the text up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that we have our index-banner. And inside of it, we have an h2 tag. So I'm going to say curly brackets. And I'm just going to go ahead and check out what we have for the styling inside the h2. We have 60 pixels using a font that I'm not going to use. So I'm just going to switch to the catamaran that I linked to. But we know it has to be 60 pixels and it has to be a bold weight. So we go inside our code here, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste from what we have up here because that's a lot easier. And I'm just going to paste it down. And I'm going to change the color to white. Going to change it from 16 to 60 pixels in size. And I'm going to go ahead and center the text. So I'm going to say text-align center. Like so. Going to go inside the browser, refresh, and now you guys can see we have some text going on. Now I do also need to include a weight because I want it to be slightly thicker. So I'm going to say font dash weight, set it to 900. And just check out how it looks like. So it does look quite good, I think. Now we could also add a text shadow because it makes it stand out a bit more, because you may notice that some of the background is actually white. And for example, here with the A, we can't quite see what's going on there. So I'm just going to go back inside my styling. Say we have a text dash shadow and set it to, let's start with 2 pixels, 2 pixels, and a color set to 111. Refresh the browser, and as you may notice, we now have a text shadow. Now I do think I want to add a blur to the shadow, so I'm just going to go back inside my style sheet because it's a bit too much when it's not blurred out. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a third parameter right before the color and set it to maybe 8 pixels of blur inside the text shadow. And there we have it. Okay, we could also make it a slightly less dark color if we wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this one for now. Now I want to create the styling for the bottom text, and then afterwards we're going to create the spacing from the H2 and the top part here. So I'm just going to go inside my design here, and as you guys can see, we have the second font type, which is the Garamond, which is 28 pixels, and it's a light italic font styling. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply that to this font here. So I'm going to say copy, paste, change it from H2 to H1, change it to, what was it? Just going to go inside my index page here and copy the font name. There we go, because that's a lot easier than just simply guessing and writing it out. I'm going to go ahead and delete the plus symbol. So we have Garamond. And I'm going to change the font to, 24 pixels? 28 pixels. There we go. And I'm going to set the font weight not to 900, but maybe just 100, because that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and keep the text shadow for now, because we might need to have that. And we also need to make it italic, so I'm going to add a font dash style, set it to italic, save it, refresh the browser, and now we have something that looks quite good. Now we're going to go ahead and create some spacing between the different paragraphs we have here, so it looks somewhat decent. I do also think we need to do something about the line height, because it's a little bit too tight together. And as you guys can see in here, there's a bit, well, if you guys can see it, there's a bit more space in between the lines, so I'm just going to go ahead and include that as well. So we're going to say we have a line dash height. Let's go ahead and set this one to, let's say 34 pixels. Again, I'm just sort of spitballing here, so we need to see if we need to increase it, and we do actually need to do that. So I'm just going to set it to 40 pixels. Refresh, and we do have something that looks a lot better. I'm also going to go ahead and include a bit of spacing between the title up here, or the what you call the H2 tag. So I'm going to just go ahead and copy the line height, paste it up here. And I'm going to change it to something above 60 pixels. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to 70 pixels, I guess. Just going to go ahead and refresh the browser and check it. And yeah, that looks just about good. So now we want to center the text inside the view here. And we do have a special technique where we can do this, which is not something that we learned about yet. Because if I were to just go ahead and give it a margin or padding from the top to push down the text, then if I'm inside a different device that has another, device height, then it's going to mess up the alignment and it's not going to be centered. So we need to add a small trick to it here. And the way we do that is by wrapping our text inside a box inside our index page. So I'm just going to scroll down to the text, and I'm just going to create a div for this one. Just going to go ahead and insert the text inside the div. And this div here is going to be a container that we're going to center inside index-banner, which means that since we're centering this container here, then all the text inside of it is going to be centered as well when it comes to the vertical view of the browser. So I'm going to give this one a class set to, let's go ahead and call something like vertical dash center, just to give it a name. I'm going to go ahead and copy it here. Go inside my style sheet, and right after the index-banner, I'm just going to go ahead and insert it here. So what I'm going to do now is something we haven't talked about yet, which is I'm going to go ahead and make our index banner into a table. And then I'm going to make our container down here with the text inside of it into a cell. And by doing this, I can then center the cell inside the table. And again, it's not something we learned yet, so I'm just going to sort of show you guys what we need to do in order to do this. So I have the index banner up here, which I'm going to give a display set to table. And I'm going to go ahead and give our container down here a display set to table cell. Vertical align it to a middle styling. And then I'm going to go ahead and go inside my website here and then refresh. And as you guys can see, we now centered the text inside the browser. Now again, we're not going to go too much into the technical things about how we centered it, because we will have a episode coming up very soon about table cells, which should explain what we did here. So just go ahead and use this trick here for now, and then in the future, if you want to, you can also use it for future projects if you wish to. So now we have this part done, and we just need to include the bottom section. If you go down into the design, you guys can see you have the different links that need to be displayed one by one. And of course, we need to have the footer at the bottom here. So let's go ahead and create this section over here now. So if we go inside our index page, we can go down inside our main section below our section called index-banner. And we're going to create a different section because now we have a different section. Ta-da! So what we're going to go and do here is we're going to go and insert all the different boxes that we need to link to other pages inside the website. Again, we're not going to create all these pages, but just to show you guys that you can include them if you want to, we're going to include all these boxes in here that's going to link. Okay, so we're going to take cases, portfolio, M2's YouTube channel, about, and contact, and make these boxes inside the index page here. And I think there was about 6 of them. So after we create the first div box, we're going to copy it 5 more times. Okay, so we're going to say we have a div, and I'm going to go ahead and give this one a class. Now, there's an easier way to style these when we have this many after each other that are similar, but we haven't talked about these yet inside CSS. So I'm just gonna not talk about it because it might be too confusing, and just go ahead and stick with what we know so far. So we're just gonna go ahead and stick with classes here. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and give this one a class as index dash, and again, I'm gonna be really uncreative here and call it box link dash 1, which is a really bad name, but again, it gets the point across. And I'm going to go inside this box here and add a h3 tag. Now the first one was cases, then portfolio, then mm2s. So let's actually go ahead and start with that one. So we have cases, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste 5 more times. I did not count there. I think there's 6. And I'm going to go ahead and change the class names to 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then I'm going to change the name, so we're going to say mm2s, and I did already forget what we had here. It's actually portfolio mm2s YouTube channel. Just going to copy paste it down here. Portfolio mm2s YouTube channel. What was the next one? The next one was about and contact. And contact. So now that we have all the different boxes inside our index page, let's actually go ahead and style them. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the first link up here, which was, well, not link, but class. And I'm going to go ahead and go down at the bottom of my style sheet, paste it in as a class, and then curly brackets. Now before we do anything in here, I do want to show you guys that I do have some spacing from the sides of the device that we're viewing it in, and the button here. So we do need to have some white space around it. And we do that, well, at least we could do it by saying that first of all, we have a margin set to maybe 20 pixels. I'm not entirely sure how much space that is. Let's actually go and set it to 10 pixels because 20 might be too much. And I'm going to go ahead and say we have a width, which is going to be calc, because we need to calculate now. And it's going to be 100% minus 20 pixels, because we have 10 pixels from each side of the box. So it goes up to 20 pixels in total. I'm going to go ahead and give it a height. And set the height to something like, let's actually go ahead and check what I did inside the design here. I did set it to 100 pixels, which for some reason makes sense. Let's go ahead and try it out. And I'm going to go ahead and set a background color to, what did I give it? I gave it a F2, which is a very light gray color. So we're going to say hashtag F2. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove the background color from our body tag, because otherwise we can't actually see what is going on here, if I can find it, up here, because it has a very similar background color as the boxes we're creating now. So we won't actually be able to see them if we still have a gray background color for the body. So I'm just going to delete it. And now what we can do is we can actually go and check out what we have so far. So I'm going to refresh, scroll down, and as you can see, we now have some spacing going around the box here. Now I do want to have a bit more spacing because I don't think that is quite enough. So I'm just going to go inside my style sheet again, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a margin set to 20 pixels, because that might actually be better. Going to change it in here to 40 pixels inside the calculate, refresh the browser, and there we have it. That might actually be a bit too much also. So let's actually go and change that again to 16 pixels. 16 plus 16 is 32. And there we go. Much better. Now we also need to have some spacing in between the different buttons here. And what we need to do in order to do this is we need to change the margin up here slightly, because right now if we were to actually have the boxes showing one by one inside the browser, there's going to be a huge gap in between the buttons and not a lot of space from the top of the first button. So we need to go ahead and say we want to change the the margin at the top and bottom to 16 pixels from the top, 16 pixels from the left and right, and 0 pixels from the bottom. We just write 0. Now, before we continue, there's one thing I want to mention, which is something I realized that you guys may notice, which is that right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to give all the different boxes here a different class name, because we need to apply the same styling to all the boxes. So why do we even do this? Well, it makes sense because once we do go inside our design, you guys can see that the desktop version does not have the same sized boxes as we do down inside the mobile version. So when it comes to the desktop version, we need to have a way to differentiate these two types of boxes that we have inside the desktop design. Now, I just realized that we probably do not need to have 6 different classes to do this. We probably just need 2. So let's go ahead and change that. If we were to go inside our index page, we need to change the first one. Well, we can just keep this one at 1, or we could call it square, because that might make sense. Because if we were to go inside the design, you can see that we have a square box, and then we have a rectangle over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste the square to the third one. And I do think that if we were to go inside the design, it's going to be the last 2 as well. So it's going to be 6 and 5. And then we can change the number 2 and number 4 to rectangle. I am not sure if I spelled that correctly. And we're going to go ahead and do it in this way instead. I also just noticed that we forgot to add a class name to this section here. So we're just going to go ahead and copy what we have up here in the top one, paste it in, like so, and change it from index-banner to index-links or something else. So what I can do now is I could technically just go ahead and copy the class name of the section, go inside my styling here, and just go ahead and replace the class name here, space, div, which means that we're styling all the divs inside index links, the container here, which means that they're now all going to have the same styling. So if we were to go inside the browser and refresh, you guys can see that we now have the same styling applied to all these links here, which is a lot easier than what I was just about to show you guys. I was about to do it the complicated way. And again, it's about minimizing our code as much as possible by reusing the code as much as we can, okay? Now, when we do come to the desktop version, we do need to make some changes, but for now, let's just go ahead and stick with this one. So now what we need to do is we need to change the link names because they're not styled yet. So I'm going to go inside my CSS file, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy what we have up here inside the index banner h1. Paste it underneath here. I'm going to copy our path from the previous styling, paste it in, space, and say that we have a h3 tag because that's what I believe we called it. Now we're going to go ahead and change a few things here. We want to change the, let's see, the font weight is, I think the font weight should be changed to something like 900. And the font style is not going to be italic. We do not want to have Cormorant Garamond, but instead we want to have Catamaran as our font type. And I do think we need to change the color to 111. And we could apply a, well, we do not need the text shadow. And I think that's about it. Now, another trick for you guys, if you do not want to add a color to each individual paragraph and h3 tag and so on, so on, so on, is you could just go ahead and create a styling called like P, curly brackets, and then give it a color set to something like #111. So you don't have to redo it all the time when you have to create a paragraph inside your code. Again, I didn't do it in this episode, but you should probably do that as a default, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and save this and see how it looks like. That looks almost like I want it to. It needs to be uppercase, and I do think that the text is a bit too thick. So let's actually go ahead and change that back to 100. Gonna make it uppercase, so we're gonna say text dash transform uppercase, and we also need to center the text. So I'm going to say we have a line height set to not 40 pixels but instead 100 pixels because the total height of the box that it's inside of is 100 pixels. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and refresh the browser, and there we have it. Well, maybe not quite like that because it's a bit too thin, the text, I think. So let's go back inside the styling and say that we do not want to have, let's go with 300 and see what the font weight does to our text. Not quite enough. Let's go ahead and say 600. Again, we're experimenting a little bit here, and that looks about right. So now we have some links going down here. We can actually, well, we cannot click them yet, so we need to do that next. So we're going to go inside our index page, and we're going to go ahead and wrap a link around all the different boxes that we have here. So I'm going to say we have a link opening tag and a link closing tag after the div. And I'm just going to reorganize this slightly so it looks a bit better. So I'm just going to go ahead and move up the anchor tag like so, move down the div box like so, and then move up the content here like so. So it looks a bit more organized than it did before. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy. Well, let's actually move all these out like so. Then I'm going to go ahead and copy all the anchor tags, beginning links inside all these different boxes that we have here. Now, if you hold down Control and click, you can actually add multiple places at once, so you don't need to do it one at a time, like so. I'm also going to do the same thing for the closing tag, so we're just going to go ahead and copy the closing tag, go after the div, after the div, after the div, after the div, and after the div, and just close it here. And we just need to move it back once, like so. And now we need to change the links here. Now, again, we don't really have a lot of these pages, so I'm just going to change the one for cases, because this is going to be the only page that we actually create together inside this project here, other than the case page. So I'm going to go and change the link from hashtag to cases.html. And now we should have some links going on. So we're to go inside the browser, refresh. You guys can see we can now click them. Of course, we could not find the page because we don't have it yet. So now we have this section down here done, and we can get started on the footer section. So we're to go inside my style sheet, go to the bottom here. We can make another comment saying footer. And I'm going to go ahead and go back inside my index page, go to the bottom here, right where we have the footer. And I'm going to go ahead and start adding different parts that we need to have inside the actual website with different content. So I'm going to go inside my design and just take a look at what we need here. Again, I'm going to go down to the mobile version. What you may notice is that we do have a menu and we have a couple of links. And if we were to go up inside the desktop version, we have 2 menus. So I want to go for, what do you call it, the desktop version. And when it comes to the styling, then make this second menu disappear, just like we did inside the header. So I'm just going to go ahead and say we have 2 menus inside the footer here. So we're going to say we have a unordered list, a list item, and inside the list item, we then have an anchor. I'm going to go ahead and just copy paste this a couple of times. I do think we need to do it 5 more times, if I was not mistaken. Just going to double check. Yeah. And then we need to do the same thing for the second menu. So just going to copy paste the unordered list and paste it down. Now we need to insert home, portfolio, or was it cases? I'm not quite sure. Cases, not portfolio. So I'm going to go back in here. Cases, about me, and contacts. Then we need to add something different inside the list item down here, which is going to be latest cases. And this one does actually not need to be a link, because this was actually a title for the different menus we have underneath here. So I'm just going to remove the link from this one. So I'm just going to say delete, 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 and delete. Then I'm going to go ahead and say we have this first text down here, which could be, and again, these are just some of the cases that I've been part of throughout my career. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy what I have here. You guys can do whatever you want. Just going to paste it below here so we don't need to go back and forward all the time. Going to copy the first one, insert it, copy the second one, insert it, third one, insert it, and the fourth one, insert it. Then we can just go ahead and delete the text again, like so. Now the next thing I'm going to include here is the images that we have inside the design. I do think I have the images inside my, nope, I do not have the images inside my folder here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab those first. Okay, so I just went ahead and downloaded a Facebook, a Twitter, and a YouTube icon so we can actually use them. And we're going to go ahead and link to these and insert them inside our index page. So what I'm going to do here is I'm first of all just going to copy the name of one of these. I think Facebook, actually no, YouTube is going to be the first one. Just going to copy the entire file path and name. And I'm going to go ahead and go inside my index page. And underneath the unordered list, I'm going to go ahead and add a div box that is going to be named footer dash links, or maybe not links, let's make social media, so SM. Then inside the div box, I'm going to go ahead and include a image. Actually, no, let's go ahead and include a anchor tag because it needs to link somewhere. So we're going to say anchor tag, and then inside the anchor tag, we have an image. Then the source is going to be an image folder / and then the name of the image. The alt tag we also need to include because we need to name the image something so we can actually SEO optimize our images, which means that Google will actually be able to tell what's inside the images when people search for it. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a YouTube logo or icon. We could say that as well. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this image tag 2 more times, like so, and change the name of them. So I'm just going to go back inside my folder and get the second one, which is going to be Facebook, I guess. Actually, no, I think that's going to be the last one down here. So we're just going to go ahead and paste it in here. Then I'm going to get Twitter and paste it in as the second one, like so. Now we do also need to close the anchor tag around each link, because that does not make sense if everything links to the same thing, of course. There we go. And there we go. If you have any kind of social media, then you can just go ahead and include the link for them directly inside the hashtag. So if I were to go to my YouTube channel, I could just copy the URL, insert it inside instead of the hashtag, and then it should actually link to your social media. I'm not going to do that here because it takes too long to get all the different links. Just going to go ahead and keep it at this for now. So now we have everything we need to have inside our index page in order to actually have a full index page inside the browser, and we just need to style it. So I'm going to go inside my style sheet and go to the bottom where we have the footer, and say we have a footer tag, curly brackets, set a width to 100%, and set a height to something like, actually let's not set a height, let's set a padding top and bottom instead, which means that it's always going to be flexible regarding the height depending on how much content is inside the footer, which makes it self-adjust, which is nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and set a padding instead. Going to set a padding to 40 pixels from top and bottom, and 0 pixels from left and right. Actually, let's actually go ahead and change this one to 40 pixels from left and right as well. And then we're going to, of course, calculate the width up here again, because we do not want to have above 100% in width. So I'm going to say 100% minus 40 pixels from left and 40 pixels from right, which is 80 pixels. Like so. And we do need to close the parentheses outside the calculation. There we go. And we need to give it a background color now. So we're going to say background dash color, set to hashtag 111. Like I said, I do not like to use completely black colors. So I'm just going to go and refresh, and as you guys can see, we now have something going on in here. Now we do need to have some spacing between the footer and the last button. So I'm just going to go back in here and say I want to add a margin dash top to 20 pixels. Like so. So now we have something going on inside our website regarding a footer. So now we can actually go ahead and style the different sections here. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside my styling, copy the footer tag, delete everything we have inside the code, and change the path name to footer UL. Then we're going to go in between the curly brackets. And the next thing we need to figure out here is the width of these menus here. Because if I were to go inside the design, you may notice that the first menu and the second menu are not going to have the same width. Because the first menu is pretty much going to be static, and it's not really going to change unless we add another page inside the website. But this menu over here is going to change constantly each time we get a new case that we want to insert inside the website, because it's the latest cases. And if we were to create another case later on that is going to be a lot longer than this text here, then it's going to change in width constantly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go inside my style sheet, and I'm going to set up my menus are going to have a width set to fit dash content, because then depending on how long the menu items are, it's always going to change the width of the menu. Then I'm going to go down to the next line and say we have a float left, and then a padding dash left, set it to 20 pixels. If I think that's enough, we could try and test it out a little bit later. And what we need to do now is we need to go ahead and style the list items and the anchor tags as well. So I'm just going to copy paste 2 more times, change it from UL to LI, and then change it from UL to LIA. Then we're going to go ahead and just delete what we have inside the list item and inside the anchor tag. And I'm just going to go up to our first navigation. So I'm just going to scroll up till we reach the list item. I'm just going to copy everything we have in here, go down to the bottom, and just paste everything in. Now I do not want the menus to be displayed in a line, so I'm just going to say not inline block, but just block. Then I'm going to go and delete the float left. The list style is still going to be set to none, and the padding is not going to be here. Like so. Then I am going to go ahead and copy the link styling from the first one, which was right here, and paste it inside at the bottom here. Now I don't think it's going to be 16 pixels in size, maybe 14 is a lot better. And I'm going to go ahead and change the color to white. Then let's go ahead and refresh the browser just to check it. And as you guys can see, we now have 2 menus going on inside the footer here. Now, looking at this a second time, you can see that, well, first of all, we need to have a bit more spacing in between the links. And we also need to have the text to be slightly bigger. At least for the mobile version, we need to do that. So I'm going to go back inside my design. Oh, and we also need to remove the second menu, which is also a thing we're going to do. So I'm going to go back inside my code. And I'm going to go ahead and say that we have a line height inside the link styling. So I'm going to say line-height. I'm going to set it to something like 20 pixels, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the second menu. And we need to do that by going inside our index page and apply a class to the different menus we have in here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and say we have a class, which is going to be equal to footer-main-links, or we could say links-main, which might actually be better. So let's actually go ahead and do that. Then I'm going to go ahead and copy the class, paste it inside the second menu, and call the second one links-cases. Then I'm going to go ahead and copy the class here for the cases one. Go inside my style sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to display none. Like so. Going to go inside the website, refresh, and as you can see, we now have something slightly different going on. Now, for some reason, our text did not change size, and that's because we forgot to change it. So I'm just going to change it to 16 pixels. Maybe that might even be too little. So let's actually go ahead and change that to, let's go ahead and say 24 pixels, just to exaggerate a little bit to see if it looks good. And I do actually think that could work. So let's actually go ahead and change the line height from 20 to 30. Refresh the browser. And now we have something that looks just about like it should. So now we want to take care of the images, which are over here. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside my style sheet, and I'm going to go to the bottom and say that we have a div box, which was footer-sm. And I'm going to go ahead and style this one. Curly brackets. I'm going to give it a width set to the width that I want my pictures to be. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to maybe 60 pixels. And then I'm going to go ahead and set a float to right. So it goes to the right side of the footer. And then I can actually go ahead and style the images inside the footer. So I'm going to say we have the same class, space, img, set a width to 100%. And I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the float here. I'm also going to go ahead and add some spacing below the images. So I'm going to say margin dash bottom. We could also say padding if you wanted to, and set this one to something like 10 pixels. Now we save it, refresh the browser. And as you can see, we get something weird going on inside the browser here. Now, when we have a box like our footer down here that has a bunch of content inside of it, which are all floating to either the left or the right side, then the container that the elements are inside of have a bit of trouble recognizing that there's anything inside of it. And we do have a fix for it. So if we were to go inside my style sheet, as you guys can see, we have a bunch of floating going on. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the container, which right now is the footer. So if we were to go ahead and scroll up to the footer styling up here, we can say overflow and set it to hidden. And this is going to magically fix what is going on inside the browser here, as you can see. Now, I do want to change the image sizes a bit. So I'm going to go back inside my div box, which is called footer-sm. Going to change the width to maybe 50 pixels. Refresh it. And that looks slightly better. Now, I do still think there's a bit too much spacing going on underneath the menu over here. So let's actually go ahead and change the line height to something like 40 pixels just to try it out. So we can actually refresh, and as you guys can see, it looks a lot better. So now we have a footer going on inside the website as well. So now this was all we wanted to do for the index page inside the mobile version, and as you can see, we do actually have a finished product here. Well, not finished, but at least what I wanted to do for this episode here. And the next thing we're going to go ahead and do here is we're going to make this one fit for a desktop version, because if I were to go outside my developer view, you can see that it still looks like a mobile version inside our desktop, which again does not look entirely bad. And this is actually one of the reasons that we want to design for mobile first, because if something were to go wrong with the media queries that makes the website responsive, then it always looks better to put a mobile version inside a desktop than a desktop version inside a mobile. So if something goes wrong, this is going to be the styling that is going to be applied to the website. Okay, so we need to change the design now to make it fit a desktop version. And the way we do that is by going inside our code, go to the bottom here. Actually, let's go ahead and go to the bottom of the header section. So I'm going to go right after the header. And I'm going to go ahead and create a media query for the header section only right here. So we're going to say we have at media only screen and parentheses. And then we're going to go ahead and set a width for when it should start changing all the content inside the website. Now, like I said, we don't have a tablet version, so we're just going to go ahead and say that when we hit the desktop version, which should be around 1000 pixels, then it's going to do something inside the browser. And again, we want to set a minimum width, so we're going to say min dash width colon, and then after the parentheses, we want to set a curly bracket. So all the code that goes in between here are going to be things that changes once we do actually hit a desktop version. So now we just need to rearrange the styling to make everything look correct. So if we were to go back inside our website, you guys can see that the menu, first of all, the logo up here has to be in the left side, and the navigation has to be on the right side of the logo over here on the left side. And then we also need to have the link up here that needed to be on the right side over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside my style sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and copy the styling that I had for my brand up here, or the logo, and paste it inside the media query. Then I'm going to figure out, okay, what do I need to change in here? Well, I do not need to change the font family. I do not need to change the font size. I do not need to change the font weight. I do not need to change the color. I do not need to change the uppercase. I do not need to change it being a block item. But I do need to change the margin, the text align, and the padding. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say that I want to set a margin to 0. And we want to set a text align left. And we want to change the padding as well. Now, before we do anything to the padding, we need to figure out how much of the padding we need to get rid of in order to actually center our logo inside the header. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, we need to create the little line. If we were to go up inside my desktop version design, you guys can see that I have a border going on the right side of the logo, which I want to appear. So I'm going to go inside my styling here, and I want to say padding, not top to bottom, but right instead. Is going to be something like 20 pixels. And I do not want to have a padding going from the left side, so I'm just going to say 20 pixels and 0 pixels, just to make sure we don't have a padding on the left side. Okay. Then I want to set a border dash right and set it to something like 2 pixels. Actually, let's set it to 3. That might actually be better. 3 pixels, a solid line, and as a dark gray color, which is 111. And let's actually go and see what happens inside the browser now. So as you can see, we do have a couple of things going on here. We do have a border, but it's all the way over here on the right side, which is because right now the link is going to be 100% width of the containers inside of. And the way we fix that is by using float. So if we go back inside our styling, go inside our code here, I can go ahead and say we want to float this specific item to the left. Go inside my website, refresh, and now you guys can see it now fixed it. Now what I'm going to do next here is I don't want to have the border have a height because of the padding, because it messes things up. We want to center our logo inside the header. So I'm going to go back inside our code, and instead of setting a padding from top and bottom, I'm going to go ahead and set it to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and say 0 pixels from the top and bottom, like so. And I'm also going to go ahead and change the left padding because I do not want my logo to be touching the left side of the browser. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it a left padding as something like, let's say 40 pixels, just to see how it looks like. And there we have it. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and change the height of this border over here. And we do that using line height instead, because it becomes a lot easier to calculate how much we need to push down the logo when we use a line height. So I'm going to set a line height and set it to something like 30 pixels just to test it. Refresh the browser. And now we have a slightly longer border, but let's actually go ahead and make it slightly longer. So we're going to say 38 pixels maybe. And there we have something that looks just about right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back inside my code here. And now we need to calculate, because right now we have a header that is 100 pixels high, and we need to subtract 38 pixels from 100 pixels. And the result of that is then going to be what we need to divide at the top and bottom of the logo in order to center it. So we say 100 minus 38, which is going to be 62. And then we're going to take half of that, which is going to be 31. So we're going to say we want to include a, not padding, but a margin. We can actually go ahead and go up to the margin here and say we want to have a margin top set to 31 pixels. And then a left and right to 0. I'm going to save it, refresh the browser. And now you guys can see we centered it. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to focus on the navigation, which is over here centered. So if I were to go back inside the code and go up and copy the navigation part, which should be starting right here, I can just say copy down to the anchor tag and paste it inside my media query down here. And then I just need to figure out what do I actually need to change inside of here. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to say margin should be 0, not 0 auto, because I don't want to center it. And the width can still be the entire width of the content, so we can just go and delete that. We don't need to change it. And we don't need to change the display block either. So we just need to change the margin set to 0. Now we do need to add a float, because we need it to go on the right side of our logo. So we're going to say float left. Save it, then go inside the browser just to see what we did. And now you guys can see we have it positioned somewhere around where we want it to. So now what I need to do is I need to push it down. And we do that by going inside our code here and setting a line height inside the list item or inside the anchor tag, depending on how much we want to be clickable. So let's actually go and do it inside the anchor tag. So we're going to say line height. And then we're going to set this one to maybe 60 pixels just to try it out. And then again, just like we did with the logo, we can then say, okay, we have 60 pixels. And then we can do the same thing as with the logo and say we have 100% height inside the header. And then we can subtract the 60 pixels, which is 40. And then we have 20 left over, which needs to be split up into the top and bottom of the navigation. So we're going to go back up inside the unordered list and say we have a margin set to 20 pixels from top and bottom and 0 pixels from left and right. There we go. Refresh the browser. And now it's centered. Now I do want to have just slightly bit of spacing in between the portfolio and the line we have over here. So I'm going to go back inside my code, and I do perhaps want to add a bit of spacing on the left side. So I'm going to say we have 20 from the top, 0 pixels from the right, then 0 pixels from the bottom, or we could say 20, it doesn't really matter. And then we could say maybe 20 pixels from the left side. Then I can refresh the browser, and now we have a bit of spacing. Now I also want to make this uppercase, so let's actually go ahead and change that. We didn't do that in the first place. So to make this uppercase, both in the mobile and the desktop version, we need to go back up to the mobile version styling. And we need to change the anchor tag to uppercase. So we're going to say text, transform, uppercase, and refresh the browser. Now the last thing we need to do inside the header is to make the link over here on the right side appear. So we're going to go back inside our styling, go up to the mobile version, and get the header cases, which we set to display none, and set it to display block. So I'm just going to go down, paste it in, set it to display block. Now also we do need to remove the non-necessary code from up here. We did paste in the rest of the navigation, so we did not change the inline block, we did not change the float, we did not change the style, and we did not change the padding, I believe. So we could essentially just delete this section here. When it comes to the anchor tag, we didn't need to do anything to the font family, not anything to the size, not anything to the color, and not anything to, well, we did have a line height, so we need to keep that in here. So now that we have this one set to display block, we can actually go ahead and go back up and add some styling to it. I'm just going to copy what we have from inside the navigation, inside the mobile version, paste it in here, because I need to actually style it once we do actually have it appear inside the website, because we haven't done that yet. And I'm also going to go ahead and copy the line height to it, because I want to add a border box around it, just like I have inside my design here. I'm just going to show you guys. This one right here. So I need to do the same thing as I did over here with the menus, but just by including a border around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say we have a border I'm going to set this one to 1 pixel for now. Then I'm going to say solid, hashtag 111. And let's go ahead and see how it looks like. Now that just kind of messes things up, so let's actually go ahead and give it a float right. Like so. Refresh it again to see how it looks like now. And now you guys can see we have it over here on the right side. Now what I want to do is I want to just push it out from the right side of the browser, and I want to change the height of it and the width of it. So I'm just going to start by pushing it from the right side by giving it a margin. Set to margin dash right to 40 pixels because that's the same spacing we had for the logo from the left side. And I'm going to go ahead and change the width of it. And to make sure that the text is always centered inside this button here, I'm going to change the width by adding a padding to it. So I'm going to go ahead and say we have a padding. It's going to be 0 from top and bottom, and it's going to be 20 pixels from left and right. Like so. Refresh it just to see how it looks like. And now it has a proper width. Now we need to change the height, so it's not going to be a line height set to 60, but instead maybe 40. Just going to double check, and that looks a lot better. We might need to change it again because I'm going to set it to 38 so it has the same height as the line over by the logo. Then I'm going to go ahead and refresh the browser, and I think that looks good enough. So now we just need to push down the button a bit. So we need to go inside our style sheet and do the same thing again. We need to take the height of the header, which is 100, and then subtract 38 from it, which is 62, and then take half of that and add to the top and bottom. So we can actually go ahead and say we want to also set a margin top, margin dash top to 31 pixels. Now we do also need to keep in mind that when we add a border to it, it's going to add 1 pixel to the top and bottom as well, making the line height not 38, but 38 plus 1 at the bottom and 1 at the top, meaning that we did actually have 40 pixels of height that we needed to subtract from the 100 pixels. So we're going to go ahead and change the 31 pixels down here to 30 pixels instead. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside my browser, refresh, and as you guys can see, we now have it centered. So now we do actually have a complete menu working inside the desktop version, and if we were to actually go ahead and refresh the browser so you guys can actually see it change, you can see that when I do actually start twitching it, you guys can see it starts changing when I do actually reach that 1000 pixel width that we set it to inside the media query, which looks quite nice. Now the next thing we're going to change here is that we want to change the height of the banner that we have inside the website. So I'm going to say that we want to change it to 500 pixels because that's what I had inside my design. So I'm going to go inside my styling here, and I'm going to go down and copy the media query that we had in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and find it. We have it right here. I'm going to go ahead and just copy it and paste it right below the index section. Because now we're going to add the media query for the index section only inside the style sheet. I'm just going to delete all the content inside of it, like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy the banner styling that we have up inside the index section here. So I'm just going to say we have index banner. I'm going to copy it, paste it inside the media query, and I'm going to change the height to not a calculation, but instead 500 pixels. Then I'm going to go ahead and refresh the browser. And as you guys can see, we now have something that looks a lot better. Now there's one more thing I want to do with the text inside the banner here, which is to change the width of the bottom text here because it's actually quite long and I would rather have it on 2 lines instead of just 1 line. So I'm going to give it a max width that it's allowed to reach before it starts jumping down to next line. So I'm going to go inside my code again, and I'm going to go ahead and copy the text styling for the bottom text, which is going to be the H1 styling up here. I'm going to paste it below here inside the media query. And I'm going to go ahead and delete everything from in here because we don't need it. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a display block. So we make it into a block element. And then we give it a width set to 600 pixels just to test it. Save it, refresh, and you will notice that the text is not centered anymore. Now I do think that UX design should be all the way on a new line, perhaps. So I'm just going to make it slightly less wide. So I'm going to set it to 580 instead, just to test it. And we do need to decrease it a bit more. So we're going to say 560. And there we go. Now I want to center it. So I'm going to go ahead and say we want to give it a margin set to 0 auto, refresh, and now you guys can see we have it centered again. Now looking at the design, I do think I want to decrease the height of our banner slightly more, so I'm just going to go back inside my code and going to go up to the banner section, change it from 500 to maybe 450. Now I do also want to delete all the other styling because we're not going to change any of that. Just going to delete it, and there we go. Now the next section we need to change before getting to the footer is the links down here. So now we do actually need to use the classes that we applied to them inside our index page. As you can see, we did actually add these index box link square and rectangle, which we're going to go ahead and use now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and say that we want to copy one of them. Let's actually start with the square. Go inside our style sheet, and inside our media query, I'm going to say we have a class called this. And I'm also going to go ahead and copy the styling for the box itself. So I'm going to go ahead and say we have the box up here, which was index links div. I'm going to go down, paste it in. And what I want to do is I want to change these slightly. So I want to say that we don't have margin set to 16 pixels, but instead maybe 10 pixels on the top and the left and the right side. Now the bottom is just going to stay 0. Now before we continue styling the width of these boxes here, we need to add a wrapper to the website, because as you can see inside the design, we do have a wrapper going on with the content and the footer at the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go back inside my index page, and I'm going to go ahead and add a wrapper around some of the content here. So I'm going to go right after the main tag that we have here. I'm going to create a div box, and I'm going to give it a class set to wrapper. Then I'm going to close the wrapper around all the content we have inside the main section, right down here at the bottom, right after the footer, like so. And then I'm going to move everything out so we can actually get some sort of organized code inside our index page here. So I'm just going to move everything out once. And now we need to style the wrapper. So I'm going to go inside my media query, and I'm going to go ahead and say we have a wrapper styling. So we're going to say a class called wrapper, curly brackets. And the wrapper in this case is going to be 1000 pixels width. So we're going to say we have a width set to 1000 pixels. A margin set to 0 auto, like so. And let's actually go ahead and refresh the browser here. So now you guys can see we have everything centered inside the wrapper here. But we did actually include the banner, which I should not have done. So let's actually go ahead and go back inside the index page and grab the wrapper, delete it, and just go ahead and move back the banner section, because we don't need to have that inside a wrapper. So we're just going to go ahead and include the wrapper after the banner section, like so. And there we go. So now we need to change the width of all the different divs that we have inside the link section down here. So I'm going to go back inside my style sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and go down to the div section we have down here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the width, delete it, and then insert it inside the square styling that we have down here. Then I'm going to go ahead and change it so we don't have 100%, but instead 25%, because if I were to go back inside the design here, you guys will actually notice that all the boxes, if we were to pretend that these were all squares, we would actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 spots for squares, which is 25% per square, meaning that we're going to take 25% and minus the margins we have inside the width here. So we're going to go back inside our code and say we have 25% minus not 32, because we do actually have, I think that was 60 we had in margins in total for each side of each box, like so. And if I then go inside and refresh the browser, you guys will notice that nothing changes. And that's because we still have a width applied to the div box up here inside the mobile version, and it has not disappeared yet, because we haven't set a width to 0 inside the div box here. But we can't do that, because then it's just going to be 0. So what we need to do is we need to overwrite the previous styling from inside the div here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say after my CSS value down here, I'm going to say exclamation mark important, which means that it's now going to ignore all other stylings that comes to this specific elements when it comes to the width, and it's going to apply this styling here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save it, refresh. And as you guys can see, we now have something going on inside the browser here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and change the height as well for the div, because it should be 250, not 100. There we go. And I can actually see I made a mistake here because we need to go back inside the styling and not say the width should be -60, but instead -20, because we only need to take per square. So I'm just going to go back, refresh, like so. And you might need to change the height of the boxes here because they are quite big, because we want to have a square and not something that looks like this. So I'm going to go back inside the styling and not say height to 250, but maybe 230. Just try it out. And it looks a lot better. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and apply the styling to the rectangles and not the squares. So we're going to go ahead and say we have another styling called index-boxlink-rectangle. If that is spelled correctly, I hope it is. And we're going to go ahead and change the width to not 25% but 50%. Because the rectangles take up twice as much space as the squares, so we can go ahead and say 50% instead. Refresh the browser, and there we have it. So now we just need to put these next to each other, and we do that by going inside our styling, go down to our div styling here, and say float left. Then I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and as you can see, we now have them all next to each other. Now, after refreshing the browser, I did also notice that we have different spacings going on in between and on the top and the bottom of each square. So we need to change these values a bit. So if we go back inside the code, I'm going to go ahead and say that we have a margin set to 20 pixels from the top. Refresh the browser, and there we have it. Now, one more thing I want to do here is I also want to add some spacing between the footer and the links up here. So I'm going to go back inside my code. And remember when we, inside the footer, had to apply a overflow set to hidden because we had a bunch of floating elements inside a container that weren't being registered as being part of the container. Now it's sort of the same thing here, because if I were to go ahead and just copy the index links section we have here and apply for example, a padding bottom, padding dash bottom, set it to 20 pixels to sort of push away the footer a bit. Go back inside the website, you guys will see that nothing happens down here. And that's because right now the container can actually see how many things are inside the container itself, because they're all floating. So we need to go back inside the code and also say that we want to add a overflow set to hidden. Go back inside the website, and now you guys will see that we get this part down here with the spacing. And we didn't actually need to add a padding, because I do think we had that up inside the mobile version already. So there we go. Now we need to center the text inside the different containers. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside my code and say that we have our text styling, which are the H3 stylings we have up here. So I'm just going to take them, copy them down inside our media query. And I'm going to go ahead and change a lot of them because we don't need to have everything except for the line height. And the line height we're going to change to, what was the height of it? To 30 pixels, like so. And refresh. Now you guys can see it's been centered. So the last thing we need to do is we need to change the footer down here. So I'm just going to go ahead and go inside my style sheet, copy the media query part that we have up here, and paste it below the footer part inside our styling. Then we're just going to delete everything inside the media query, like so. And we're going to go ahead and first of all set our footer links cases to display block, because we need it to appear, like so. Refresh the browser, and now you guys can see that we have this specific section in here. Now we do also have a title called latest cases, which needs to be styled. So I'm going to go inside my index page, and then when we have the footer links down here, I'm just going to go ahead and add a paragraph styling around the text that we have down here, like so. Now we could also use something called a span, but we haven't talked about that one yet, so I'm just not going to mention it right now. So now that we have this, we can actually go back inside the style sheet, and we can say that we have, well, let's actually just go ahead and copy the styling up here called footer ULLIA, and just paste it right after the cases here. And I'm just going to go ahead and change the path up here to not anchor, but instead paragraph. Then we can actually go ahead and refresh. And as you can see, we now have a different styling. Now it does need to be uppercase, so let's actually go ahead and change that. I'm going to go inside the text again, and I'm just going to go ahead and make this one uppercase. So we're going to say text dash transform uppercase and refresh. So now what we need to do is we need to add some spacing in between these menus here. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that we want to add some spacing. So I'm going to go up here and copy my unordered list styling. Go down here, paste it in. Let's actually go ahead and do it up here. And I'm going to go ahead and set a padding right to something like 30 pixels. And refresh. Now I do also want to delete all the stylings that we don't need to have in here, so I'm just going to remove those as well. Now I did notice that the footer has not become part of the wrapper, so we need to figure out why that has not happened yet. So we're going to go ahead and go inside our index page and see where we stop the wrapper. Now I do have the wrapper down here, so we need to figure out why it's not registering as actually being inside a wrapper. Okay, so the wrapper is not working inside the footer because the wrapper is inside our main tag and the footer is not inside the main tag. So we're basically doing something a little bit weird here. So this div styling down here is going to be part of a second wrapper we're going to include somewhere else inside the website. So I'm going to copy the wrapper here and I'm going to go after the main tag and create another wrapper because we need to do that. And then the closing tag for the wrapper at the top here, we're going to go ahead and add right after we have this section inside the main tag here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and move back the main tag, save it, refresh, and now you guys can see we have something that looks right. And again, if that went a bit too fast for you, just make sure that the wrapper closes and opens the right places. So we need to have one wrapper right before the section with all the links, and then it needs to close after the section with all the links. Then we need to add a second wrapper right before the footer and right after the footer. Okay? Now, this is basically all we need to do in order to make a website that is essentially responsive. So if we were to resize it, you guys will actually see that everything changes inside the website when I start resizing it, which is quite nice because now it's actually responsive, which is what we wanted to have. Now, I did say we're going to do more pages than this, and I've actually been recording for about 3 hours and 50 minutes. If you guys have noticed a bunch of cuts in this episode, it's because there's a lot of things going on in the background where I'm sitting right now. So there's a lot of sounds going on that interferes with the microphone. So I've actually been pausing for 10 minutes at a time. So my voice is sort of worn out from all the repeating I had to do when something came and interrupted. So I'm going to go and split this project into 2 episodes. So the first one here is going to be the mobile responsive front page and the entire front page. And then the second episode is going to be the 2 sub pages because we did essentially already create the header and the footer and the mobile responsiveness, which we're not going to do for the sub pages. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little project, and I'm going to go ahead and create a second episode for this project here. Okay? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I just want to say thank you for all the support you've given me on YouTube, and give out a huge thanks to the people on Patreon who supported me on Patreon on a monthly basis. And if you're new and you don't know about Patreon, you can go ahead and click on the link in the description of this video, and it'll take you to my Patreon where you can pay a small amount every month either to support me or to download the lesson material for my lessons here on the channel. So I hope you guys will take the time to go and check that out, and I hope to see you guys next time.